Some of you probably weren't even born then, right? Most of you probably weren't born then.
In the early 90s?
Yeah,
No, even the late 90s you weren't, were you?
yeah.
2000s.
Wow.
Wow.
So.
Yeah.
So I had to refresh, I kind of had to do a little bit of a refresher for myself, to remind myself what micro and macro were again. But I'm going to talk mostly in terms of how it affects us here in Colby and Thomas County and rural communities specifically, since that's my focus. There's always been the talk about rural versus urban. I always laugh because constantly I hear people say, well, yeah, it's great living in a rural area because the cost of living is so much less. How many people believe that that's actually true? No, right.
Yeah.
That's good because it's not. The cost of living in a rural community is almost always higher. Great example. So if you're driving east or west, well, let's not use west as a great example. If you're driving east and you're buying gas, the further east you go, the closer you get to 35, the closer you get to Kansas City, the price of gas goes down dramatically. The difference between Hayes and Colby is typically on average at least 10 cents a gallon. Anybody know why? Transportation.
That's what I was going to say. They have to bring it
Cost
farther.
more to bring it out here. Same thing for your groceries. Groceries in Colby at Dillon's here are always going to be higher than they are at Dillon's in Hayes or Dillon's in Wichita. Especially when Dillon's in Hutchinson, it's going to be way cheaper because the distribution center is there. So it lowers the cost to bring it to us. There are three factors that affect us dramatically in rural communities. Wages. People always think, well, like my money goes a lot further. Well, we've already discussed two areas that demonstrates that it doesn't. But wages typically are depressed in rural communities because of the belief that the cost of living is so much less. And so a lot of employers think, well, I don't have to pay as much as they do in the big city because it doesn't cost as much to live here. What's one thing that probably affects, I would think it would affect most of you when you think about your day-to-day life. What's one factor, or especially as you think about moving out of college into the workforce, what's one thing that would be maybe microeconomic that would affect you, that this especially affects Colby? How are you gonna live?
Housing, yeah.
Housing. And Colby is in a severe crisis for housing. We have, on any given day, on average, we typically have 3 or 4 houses on the market.
3 or 4
3
is
or
all.
4. Typically nowadays, when a house comes on the market, it's usually sold. 95% of homes in Colby in the last 6 months have sold for sale by owner. They've not even used a real estate agent because the moment their friends find out that they're looking to sell their house, word of mouth travels faster, and they already have people knocking on their door or calling and saying, hey, I heard you're gonna sell your home. And it just goes by that.
I can vouch for that because my parents' home, we don't have it ready yet, but hopefully this summer we'll work on it. We've got people that are contacting us about it. Are you planning to sell it this summer or whatever?
And so the price of homes, because the supply is so low, price of homes has skyrocketed. For example, like my home, which I bought in 2005 for $73,000. Today, I've had people that have asked, like, hey, would you be interested in selling your house? Have offered $230,000.
Wow.
So the cost of housing is dramatic, and rentals are the same way. How many of you rent your home here and rent someplace here in Colby? A couple of you?
Yeah.
How hard was it for you to find that rental?
It's very hard.
I hear that all the time. So one of the biggest things that I deal with is workforce as well. And so I'm constantly working with employers that are trying to find people to come in and take and fill those jobs. On any given day, there's at least 100 jobs open in Colby. Every day, I have 100 openings.
Wow.
Some of those are part-time, some of those are full-time, but we can't fill them because we don't have enough people. And the number one thing that affects people in coming to Colby to take those jobs is housing. People will accept an offer, then they'll come to town and start trying to find a place to live. And on any, I would probably venture to guess in the last 6 months, I've probably had employers tell me that they've lost half of the people that they've offered jobs to because they couldn't find housing. Yep.
Do you mind if I say? I
Please.
had that experience when I got the job here to teach at Colby. I couldn't find an apartment, and there were like 3 available. That's all I could find that were available, and they really weren't in very good condition. That's why they were still available. But they were asking like $700 to $900 per month,
Yep.
and one of them didn't even have like a furnace. You had to use like a plug-in, like a space heater. And I said, well, how does that heat the whole place? Well, you probably you need more than one, and you probably get good at flipping breakers. Because it would overload the wiring. And I thought, I'm not going to live there because that might not be safe. So my plan B, C, and D was to bring my camper down and is it Borkwin still? I don't know what that's called out there. It's whatever it's called, that campground out there. And stay until I could find an apartment. Just stay in my camper. But yeah, I had that problem of finding a place.
So, how many of you want to own a home?
One day.
How many of you think you'll be able to afford to own a home? Every hand went down,
Yeah.
except for 1 or 2. That's the number one thing that I hear in talking to my colleagues across the country, is that young people, there's the American dream. And is the American dream still sustainable? And is it even achievable? And housing is the number one issue in that, because the cost of ownership versus the cost of renting. I get some friends of mine that are economists, and it's sad to say, when they do the math, in a lot of cities now, it actually is a better the cost benefit analysis now demonstrates that in most cases, you're better off renting than you are owning a home. Because for you, and you'll hear, you'll probably hear your parents, especially your grandparents, talk about what's their number one asset, number one retirement asset is their home.
Their home, yeah.
So downsizing and selling that big home that they had for their family, moving into the smaller home in retirement creates an additional retirement revenue for them. So talked about housing. What's one other big thing that affects people? I'm sure most of you probably aren't thinking about this at all. But I would venture to guess 5, 6, for sure 10 years by the time you're out of school, you will be thinking about this.
Benefits.
Benefits is a big one, but that's not the one I was going for.
Investing?
No, childcare.
Yeah.
You're gonna want to have a family, most of you, I would imagine. And especially if you wanted to live in Colby, childcare is the number 2 issue that I hear from employers that are trying to attract people here. That they're either already they already have a family and need to find childcare so when they go to work, or they're planning on having a family. Those folks that are planning on having a family are the ones that are in the most dire need, because finding someone to care for infants is the most difficult thing to find right now. And then from a microeconomic standpoint, you guys have probably talked about how regulation plays a big part of that. On the childcare side, regulation is one of the things that hurts Kansas the most, is because our regulations in Kansas for childcare are some of the most stringent in the nation. And there's 2 sides to that, obviously. There are the folks that will say, well, it's great that we have such stringent regulations because it protects our kids. The flip side is, it makes it, the barrier to entry to do childcare in a childcare setting is so high. So that it really has created, we've had tons of people leave the industry because the barrier entry, the cost of providing childcare was more than they could charge because the market wouldn't bear the cost. You mentioned I think it was you mentioned benefits. When you start thinking about wages, that's one of the other big things that no one ever really taught. When I was a kid, thinking about going to school and then going on and getting a job, I never thought about benefits. But benefits, from an employer standpoint, are a huge cost, but they also have turned into one of the number one drivers for getting people to choose their jobs. So if you think about benefits, what are examples of benefits when you think of benefits?
Insurance.
Insurance, so health insurance, life insurance, disability insurance. What are some other benefits?
Bonuses.
Bonuses. Everybody likes a bonus, everybody likes more money in their pocket. What's the number one thing that you think that I especially hear from people in your generation? And it's none of those. Time off.
Oh.
The number one thing younger generations want is time off. More so than wage, more so than any other benefit. The number one thing that they're concerned about is how much time do I have to go out and live my life away from work. So that's a huge cost. And for employers, most people, my age and older especially, they can't wrap their head around that. We were all raised that, like, if you want to go out and succeed, it's all about time and like work. And now we're seeing a dramatic shift in the United States to the beliefs in the United States now and more so are starting to align even more with European culture. In Europe, when you typically start on a job, let's start out. In the United States, what's the average starting benefit for time off when you start a job?
1 or 2 weeks.
2 weeks
2
is the average, is the national average. You'll start with 2 weeks off a year. If you were in Europe, what do you think what do they think? What do you think that they start off with?
Anybody?
Anybody?
4 weeks.
4 weeks.
4 weeks.
They start the minimum. The minimum is that they start with a month.
Also depending on where you work.
So in Europe, you start a job, you're gonna get 4 weeks off a year at the bare minimum.
Wow.
The average is 6.
Really?
6 weeks.
Looks like I'm going to Europe.
Going to Europe?
I'm sorry?
Looks like I'm going to Europe.
Yeah, I mean, so that's one of the biggest things when we talk about, especially when you're talking about all the different things that affect wages. That's one of the biggest things that affects wages is because that's a cost. You guys have certainly talked about inflation, right?
Mm-hmm.
How the cost of goods has skyrocketed. You probably talked about how the influx of cash from the government during the pandemic affected inflation, right? What's one of the biggest things that you heard about that happened during the pandemic that affected cost of goods?
Could we get the goods we wanted? Go ahead.
Yeah, I was
Yeah, go ahead.
Right, yeah, so getting it here, you always heard this the constraint of the supply chain. How many people believe that was really true? And how that affected costs? It was only a factor for about 3 months.
Really?
And when we talk about regulation, you're gonna hear more and more about it now. There are more and more investigations happening at the federal level into the supply chain and what its true effect was on cost and profit taking by corporations. We're seeing more and more data that demonstrates that the supply chain was only an issue for about 3 months, And corporations have used that supply chain excuse now for 2 years to artificially inflate costs for the benefit of shareholders. If you look at almost every, so especially like, if you look at consumer packaged goods and like all those things that we rely on a day-to-day basis, and you look at cost of inputs versus, and then what they are today, it has increased, but not to justify the cost that they're charging on the shelves. And when you look at the profits in those sectors, profits, like it's a dramatic curve up. So
basically, they were taking advantage of the situation
absolutely,
and extending it farther than it should have been.
yep. And you will still hear certain companies talk about, yeah, we're still dealing with supply chain constraints. And in some sectors that's true.
Yeah, 4 years later.
But in most, it's just become a crutch that they use to say, well, it just costs more, sorry.
Wow.
So we talked about profit a little bit, talked about housing, childcare, wages. In our area, when you start thinking about like, you guys talked about like the 4 concepts, like the resources for microeconomics, like land, labor, capital, technology. One of the ones that we talk about, especially in rural areas a lot, that you probably haven't maybe talked about is entrepreneurship. So in economic development, people think of economic development, especially in the old days, it was all about how do you recruit businesses to come to your community, how do you help the businesses that are already here grow, and all those things that go into that, so labor, workforce development. When I first got into the industry, housing was never a concern. We never worried about housing. Housing always just took care of itself. That's not the case anymore. I spend half my day talking to people about housing and how we're gonna solve the problem that we have. And that all goes back to capital. And then getting people here to do the work of actually building housing. But entrepreneurship is probably the second focus that we spend time on today at my office, is because helping people identify opportunity to create their own jobs is really how we're gonna grow the economy even further in rural areas. Because if you think about, like, if I was in Salina, my focus would be on how do I bring in the next big company?
Right.
Because they have workforce to support it. I don't have that here. And even if I had so the other thing is people say, well, constantly I hear people say, gosh, if only you could get us a factory. Why can't we have more manufacturing in Colby? And so the easy response to that is well, so typical manufacturers are between 20 and 50 employees. If I bring in 20 or 50 employees,
Where are they?
where are they gonna live?
Yeah.
Who's gonna take care of their kids? So if I do something like that, now I've just cannibalized the market that I already have. So now I've got every business in town mad at me. So I'm better off spending my time helping people in younger ages and older ages figure out what's their next step in their career that maybe they can fill the need themselves through their own business and becoming an entrepreneur. Best guess, what's the number one growing age group of entrepreneurs today?
Yeah.
No, that's number 2. Over 50.
Oh, really?
I said 50.
Yeah,
That'd be-
over 50. The number we'll call them retirees. The number of retirees that have left the workforce because they thought they wanted to retire, especially folks that are retiring early, so late 50s, early 60s, the number of those that are returning to the workforce as entrepreneurs is just amazing right now.
So would a lot of them have had like some kind of a pension or that?
Yep.
So they could retire early,
Yep.
which that's kind of a thing that's a thing of the past too, like for the younger generation coming up. Well, or is it still,
Honestly, it all goes, so the retiring early is still absolutely possible. It all goes back to, somebody said investment, I think it fell in the corner, it said
yeah,
investing. It all goes back to that. And that's, like, that's the number one thing I always tell people that are younger. And then they're always just like, well, I need money. I don't want, like, saving money is one of the last things they ever want to think about, but
that's very,
honestly, and I'm sure you've had class at some point that talked about the value of compound interest. But every dollar you can put away now, today, do it. Maximize every opportunity you have. I would argue that even in college, you should be putting away money, if you can. Just because the value of that money later is gonna be, will put you in the situation that you could retire in your 50s. Absolutely. But it all goes back to, it goes back to planning. So what are the things that you guys think about? What do you wanna talk about when you talk about microeconomics? What are the things that affect you the most in your day-to-day life as a college student? Lord knows it's changed since I was in college, so.
Price of cars.
Oh my God, the price of cars.
yes, definitely.
Jesus. Yeah, the price of cars is dramatic. I was on a lot 2 weeks ago with a friend, in the cost of the pickup, I was, just was waiting for him, and, looked at the sticker price on a pickup, and it was $110,000.
What? I hadn't heard that. Wow.
Yep,
110?
Yeah, it's 150 back home.
Wow.
it's crazy.
Well, it's like a vehicle now costs like what a home used to cost.
Yeah.
Yeah, and a home is permanent. That's your long-term asset.
Yep.
But a vehicle comes and goes throughout your life. It depreciates a lot faster. A home holds its value. Wow.
Yeah.
Because like 30 years ago, approximately, I bought a home when I first was married and had a young child and that for $48,000. And it was a ranch style home, big garage and that. It was in Lyons, Kansas.
Yep.
Well, when we purchased in Hayes then, maybe, I don't know, a few years later, it was like 140,000.
Yep.
Yeah, for that style of a home and all of that double car garage and crazy. What else affects you guys?
Groceries.
Mhm.
Groceries, yeah. Yeah, I see that myself. Think about college, I haven't bought them in a long time. What's the cost of ramen noodles today? So how many of you guys eat ramen noodles? Do college students still eat ramen noodles? I lived on those when I was a kid in college. What do ramen noodles cost today?
Probably like 6 for a 12 pack, so it's not bad.
$6 for a 12-pack? That's a big change.
It used to be like 20.
That's a huge.
Yeah, they used to be like 20, 25
Or either
cents.
one.
Huh?
What was it before?
When I was in college, we used to buy 10 for $1.
Yeah.
10 packages of ramen noodles for $1. There were some times in college, like, I was literally like searching the floorboards of my car to make sure I could eat a couple meals before payday.
Oh, man. Well, like student loans, the debt incurred to get
Oh,
their
yes,
education,
yeah.
and that would probably be a big factor.
I can't even, yeah. Ballpark, what's it cost a year to go to school in Colby today? Tuition fees, room and board,
10 to 12,
10 to 12.
and I think it goes up next year, but
That's with housing and everything, Nick? Okay.
I'm not too sure. I'm not so much about it.
Yeah, I think I was spending my, in my last year in school, I was spending about 6,
I also don't know what it is coming.
so.
Yeah.
I actually expected, well, I guess, Colby's also on the lower end, so.
Uh-huh.
Was it at a state school or?
Yeah.
I think it was state.
Huh?
With that, or was it student loans, or was it just 6?
What do you mean?
Like, were you just paying 6 a semester at a state school, like?
That was, it was around $6,000 total for room, board, tuition fees.
Without any scholarships?
Yeah.
What?
Yeah.
What school?
University of Toledo, that's where I went.
Oh, Toledo.
Yeah, I'm older,
In Louisiana.
In Ohio.
but I'm older, but 40 years ago, I went to Colby here and I had my a scholarship for it. And then I went to Fort Hays and thankfully I had a good scholarship there. But it was $35 a credit hour. And if you took an overload, it was $5 per credit hour above anything above 15. So I took overloads. That really helped me. But can you imagine? I don't know what it is here at Colby.
Colby, we're sitting
What's
around like $40, isn't it?
Per hour?
Per
No,
credit hour?
Oh, it's much higher, I think.
Like 130 or something like that.
Oh, is it?
I think it is much, yeah. But it's still a lot lower than at like Fort Hays and Fort Hays is the lowest of the state schools too.
Right, so I think,
Classes.
it was just a presentation on Tuesday. What is today?
Wednesday?
I think somebody told me that K-State was
Oh,
340
yeah, per credit hour?
per credit hour.
For undergraduate?
I thought so.
Wow. It's almost
I
double
could
what
be
Fort
wrong,
Hays
but,
is.
Yeah.
Yeah,
It's overdone.
because my daughter just graduated, let's see, 3 years ago at Fort Hays, and it was about $5,000 a year just for tuition, plus, what was it, 7,000 or something like that for the dorm and food, and it was like $12,000 a year. But it's
Yeah.
higher now, that's been
Because I
several
think
years.
tuition and fees, I remember tuition and fees being
Online is
$2,800.
142.
Say it again?
$2,800.
Wow, per year.
No.
No,
That was,
per-
and we were on quarters back then. That was-
Oh.
That was when we were still quarters for
Yeah.
semesters. We didn't switch to semesters until my junior year, which was a huge, that was we thought the earth was falling apart. What do you mean we're gonna go to semester?
Oh, really?
Oh, yeah, it was, when you go from, it was a big change to go from quarters to semesters for us,
Wow.
semesters makes, but after the first year, we were just like, this is so much better.
Yeah, because in a quarter, you have to really cram a lot in.
Oh, yeah.
Did you find Fort Hays? Or whatever.
For Thomas County residents, it's 142 per credit hour.
Okay.
And then it gets a little higher for like out of state, that kind of stuff.
A lot of our students in here are on scholarship for athletics or music or whatever it might be, right? Yeah.
Nice.
So,
I was saying, I'm president of the endowment board, so I
oh,
hope you're applying for scholarships, because I think we just finished, our scholarship committee just finished reviewing all the scholarships last week, so.
good. That's good. So notifications will be going out sometime,
I
probably.
don't know,
Maybe, I don't know the schedule, but yeah.
that's a committee I don't serve on.
But thank you for being part of our educational system and being the board, on the board for the endowment, yeah.
Those are really the only notes I made. What are questions that you guys have about the local economy? I know it's early.
I said come prepared with questions.
Why is the gas price difference so much here compared to like in Canada? It's higher in Canada.
Well, there's a lot of reasons. First off, Canada, the oil and gas lobbies
Mhm.
don't have as much power in Canada.
Ah,
So government regulation is also higher. Cost of exploration in Canada is dramatically higher. So, when you think about, the bulk of oil production in the United States is, most of it's happening offshore. And so the cost there is less. When you start thinking about like drilling in, most drilling that happens in Canada is happening in tundra. And so they're affected by weather, which increases the cost. Distance increases the cost. Most exploration in Canada, they're essentially building towns around where they wanna drill. So, it's really reminiscent of the early coal industry in the United States, where like the coal companies literally built the town around the mine. And that's really, that's a lot of what happens in Canada, is the company basically has to build a town around where they're drilling,
that's interesting.
so.
Think about housing shortage there.
Yeah. They literally, some of those drilling towns, it's literally like mobile home.
Yeah. Mhm. So, without getting political or anything, but there's been some recent regulations enacted and some changes with like drilling in Alaska.
Yep.
And as well as like on any public lands, increasing the price by about a third.
Yep,
And
increased
all of-
leases, yeah.
So what do you see happening with our gas, our oil related products and that?
That's a really great question. Two things will probably happen. There will be price increases
Uh-huh,
by the oil companies, but at the same time, if you look at their revenues,
they're really high.
oil energy companies are making record profits.
Yeah,
In the last decade. So I would venture to guess that they will probably temper increases, just to try and keep the market happy. The other thing is, oil prices are so affected, it's a worldwide market. You would be amazed at the amount of energy that's being exported by the United States. You hear people talk about all the time, like, we don't wanna be dependent on oil from the Middle East. Well, the reality is, we're not. We produce more oil in the United States than we use. Same thing for natural gas. But the reason why the interdependence is what creates the problem, is the global market, so.
okay, thank you. I guess I'm just old
You
enough.
guys are really excited about microeconomics, aren't you?
Especially as we wind down at the end of the semester. So we've talked about it in personal finance quite a bit, like health insurance. The costs of health insurance are going just astronomically high. How many of you are on your own health insurance yet? Or are you still on your parents'? Is anybody on their own? I didn't think so. That's going to be another factor when
Huge
you're
factor.
when you're looking at benefits and jobs and things like that, is trying to find a job where your employer has a group plan and provides usually a single plan, or now more they're going to where they put a cap, like the company will pay $800 and you pay anything beyond that, which it's going way, way, way up beyond that.
Yeah.
So that's going to be something that will impact you guys coming down the road.
Do any of you guys have any guess, like, what do you think your monthly premium is for health insurance today?
For a single
For a
person?
single person. What's the average age of the room? Like, take Kathy and I out of it.
Yeah.
20.
20? Okay, so what do you think a 20-year-old person normally pays for health insurance in the market today? How much?
150 to 200.
A month?
A month.
I know
Yeah.
my
That'd be a
family's
week.
premium's 10,000.
What the? So for a 20-year-old in the market today, if you were to look at just a basic plan, you're probably looking at somewhere in the neighborhood of $250, $300
Every month.
every month.
To do what?
And that's pretty low.
To do what?
That's for health insurance. That's just to have it,
Not even saying you're gonna use it.
Right? Or you'll
There's,
probably,
and there's another industry that I'm very close to, that is experiencing record profits.
yes.
I wonder why.
Yeah, health, I could talk about healthcare in the United States for hours. It is a racket.
I would love to discuss with you sometime about that.
It's a racket.
And when you buy health insurance, it covers, but usually you have to pay a deductible amount, $1,000, $2,000 before your insurance starts paying at
Actually,
all.
it's thousands of dollars.
It could be, yes.
So most young people, so this is one of the things, so this is a great thing, because when you go to your first job, you're probably gonna be given choices
Uh-huh.
for health insurance. So like, I'll just use the state of Kansas as a great example. So if you went to work for the state of Kansas, you would have you would basically have three options. They have, the traditional plan, which is the highest premium, but that traditional plan then has the lowest deductible, which is $2,750. After that $2,750, then you pay 10%, they pay 90%, or 20, maybe it's 80-20. Up until you hit just shy of $7,000 out of your
Yes.
pocket. Then it plays at 9%. The other option, which most young people choose, is called a high deductible health plan. So the high deductible health plan means that you pay 100%, well, not 100%, you still get the negotiated cost of whatever the insurance company has negotiated, so it's still dramatically less. But you're paying basically 100% until you hit a deductible, which is again still roughly around that $2,750. And then the insurance pays a little bit more, but then you're still paying the bulk until you hit the high deductible, which is usually around somewhere between $4,000 and $6,000. And then they pay 100%. In exchange for you agreeing to pay more, you pay a lower premium. So that's what typically young people will choose, just because the other benefit of that plan is it allows you to have what's called a health savings account, which is your money. So your parents, you've probably heard parents talk about flex spending accounts. The difference between a health savings account and flex spending is at the end of the year, on a flex spending account, any money that you didn't spend, you lose it. Like there's a little bit of carryover, but if you're too far over if you're over the carryover amount, it's gone. You don't get it back.
Right.
Health savings account is your money forever.
Mm-hmm.
And when you talk about retirement, a health savings account is an awesome way to save for retirement. Because it's another form, so every dollar you put in that health savings account is yours and it grows with interest forever. The benefit is when you spend it at the end, there's no tax.
Right.
Because the money you're putting in is taxed. But maybe,
It's pre-tax, I'm
yeah,
pretty
it's
sure.
pre-tax.
Yeah.
But
So-
it grows tax-free.
So like I have a health savings account from my previous employer because I could no longer afford to buy the higher,
High deductible plan.
yeah, the lower deductible plan because the premiums were too high for my daughters and I. So I had to go with that high deductible plan. And the hope is that you're very healthy because you pay a big chunk out of your pocket and the out-of-pocket maximum can go up to like $11,000. And so we were pretty healthy, but my daughter, the year that I had to go to that high deductible health plan, she had some major health situations. I ended up paying $11,000 out of pocket that year for health costs before the insurance company totally would pay everything. So you kind of have to balance things out, but
And there's one thing we always know, the older you get.
Yeah.
You're always gonna have more health problems. So that's the other thing, like if you are putting money into that health savings account, you know, you might not spend it when you're younger.
Right.
But you'll have it when you get older. The other nice thing that I like about health savings accounts, that again, as a young person, you'll never care about.
Right.
But as an older person, there's tons of things you can spend it on.
Mhm.
It's like, so you can spend it on premiums, which you can't spend on when you're younger, but once you hit the magic age of 65, now you can spend it on premiums, because if you're retired, no one's paying for your health insurance except for you and Medicare, if we have Medicare by the time you guys retire.
Yeah.
That's another big question.
And you have to be
So-
65. Yeah.
Well, if like for me, I have to be 67 and a half. That'll be the big question is, what will the retirement age be when you guys hit retirement? Chances are it's not gonna be 67 and a half. It's gonna be north of 70, I would bet. So,
Other questions? Other thoughts?
Are you guys always this quiet? Or are you just like-
Sometimes, yeah.
I'll be honest, like economics was not my favorite thing in school either.
And you deal with it all the time.
I do.
I have had students telling me recently here how learning about economics, they hear things like in the news or conversations and they have some idea of what they're talking about,
Right.
dealing with economics or what's happening in our country and that kind of thing. It's kind of neat.
Help me understand, here's a question. How many of you are from a small town? Like, let's say 10,000 or less. Okay, rest of you are from like big cities. You know, like, give me some examples, like those of you that didn't raise your hands. Houston,
France.
where?
France.
France? Okay,
People were for.
how many of you wanna go back to, how many of you wanna live in a small town?
Probably.
I choose to.
Okay. One of the things, so that, in my job, that's the number one thing I hear from parents is, damn it, why can't you find a way to get my kids to stay home
Oh,
after college? Well, and my thought was, and my answer always is, well, help me understand, when you were in high school and college, what was your first thought? Get the heck out. I wanna go experience the world, you know? The last thing I wanted to do was live in a small town. So, you know, as soon as I had my chance, I was gone. I was in the city. But that didn't last forever. And that's the biggest thing I talk to parents is, like, I can't convince your kids to come back to a small town. For two reasons. One is they want the experience most of the time. But number two, I'm just gonna guess, but I would venture to guess that 95% of you in this room are probably looking at a career that doesn't exist in a small town very easily.
Yeah.
You know, like that's, you know, like, I always laugh when I'm talking to a parent, there's like, I want my kid to come home. What are they gonna do? What are they going to school for? Well, he's gonna be a chemical engineer. Help me understand how I put a chemical engineer to work in Colton, Kansas. You know, like those are the kinds of questions that I deal with on a pretty regular basis, so. And that's where entrepreneurship comes in. Cause some of the people that are in those specialized fields that are moving back to rural towns, because what do you wanna bet, what do you wanna get, what's your best guess of, what's the number one thing that actually convinces somebody that they really are ready to go back to a small town?
Possibly.
No,
they want to raise their children in a small
bingo,
town?
it's kids.
Uh-huh. Yeah.
They're about to have that first kid, or they have a first kid, they're ready to have number two, and they're just like, yeah, I don't wanna raise my kids here. I wanna raise my kids the way I was raised. That's when they really start looking at how do they get to go back to a small town. And for years, that was like next to impossible. It's like, well, if I have this career in this field and it doesn't exist in Colby, Kansas, or wherever, name the small town you wanna go to. But that's all changed because of remote work. And especially because of entrepreneurship. So you can create your own opportunity in a small town and work remotely, so.
Do you have any idea how many people in Colby or in our area that would be working remotely? Like what percent of the,
I don't have a
Labor force,
percent, I
or-
try and keep track.
uh-huh,
Best guess right now is we have probably about 25 remote workers that work 100% remote. We have a lot of hybrid folks. But
and that would mean working part-time remote, part-time they go to the office or
they're usually,
That kind of thing.
most of my hybrids are folks that travel,
travel, okay.
so. Yeah. Any other, we don't have much longer, I don't think, but.
We've got, it's okay, we're not
Oh, okay.
time constricted here, we're good.
Any other questions?
So you recommended that they start investing right away, small
As soon
amounts,
as you can.
as soon as possible. Any other good words of
Like,
wisdom?
I don't use it, but I've heard of that. There's an app called Acorns, where it literally just invests change.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
I've heard stuff like
So that you can tie it to your bank account, so like, say for example, like you go to Dillon's and you make a purchase and it's like $8.73.
It'll round
Yeah.
like
So
the extra
Acorns will round
cents.
it up to an even amount
Yeah.
and throw that into a retirement account.
A little at a time,
So it's I mean,
but it grows.
you know, what I mean, and so then we're talking about 23 cents.
Baby
I mean,
steps.
that would be one way to do it. Plus, the reason I like, especially for young people, I love things like that because it's out of sight, out of mind. Because how many people, you all have a checking account, right? Because you got a debit card?
Yeah.
Raise your hands. How many of you actually balance your checking account every month when the statement comes?
What does that mean? Yes. If you're in personal finance, you learn.
Yeah, so I mean, what's 23 cents?
Yeah.
How much longer before you even have change,
Yeah, makes you wonder.
right?
Well, during COVID, they were talking about not using change anymore. The,
Costs more to make a penny than it's worth.
We don't use pennies in Canada.
you don't?
No, we haven't used them for years,
What's your next highest?
like at 5 cents.
Like a 5 cent? That's pretty interesting.
Yeah. They'll just round up, so if it's like 23 cents, they'll round up to 25
Well,
cents.
a lot of places still don't take cash
Yeah.
since COVID. They still stick with card.
Uh-huh. Wow. And there's some older people that don't have cards, so then they wouldn't be able to do business there.
Yeah,
And
those people drive me crazy.
Yeah. Oops.
Like if I had my way, if you're in self-checkout, there's no such thing as cash. Those people that I see feeding the machine cat going down, like, for sure don't be in the express lane in front of me. Like, I swear, I always get in the express lane and then some old woman pulls out a checkbook and I'm just like. Checkbooks and express do not
go together. That's funny.
I mean, I live
That
at
doesn't
an
say
Apple
Colby,
Pay.
I don't know like that.
If I had my way, everybody would take Apple Pay. So I literally just have to
Just
take my
go,
watch and just go, toot, and it's done.
Yeah.
So. I think we're getting closer and closer to that every year.
I think we are too.
But
Yeah. Any other questions you have? You're thinking hard there, Raphael.
yeah,
I heard that like credit scores matter.
credit scores matter. Like
Yep.
it's huge. It's huge. Credit score back in the
I feel like I
day.
talk about that in my
Here we go. See it.
Not as much.
Back in the day,
I was like, oh,
It's
the only thing people really cared about for credit scores was when you were gonna go to buy a car or buy a house. Now, your credit score affects every job you apply for.
And when you try and rent an
Because when
apartment,
you apply for a job, one of the first things they look at is your credit score.
In your opinion, what's the best way to increase your credit score?
Best thing you can, so there's, so you, trying to remember what Fair Isaac said, but there's three big things that basically affect credit score. One is, timely payments. Two is, debt to income ratio. The other is, debt to the amount of debt you're available to you. So, general rule of thumb, I always tell people is you never wanna use more than 10% of what's available to you, and that's across every account. So, say for example, like, I don't even know, I think I probably have access to somewhere around $40,000 in credit if I have to, across different accounts. But just so 10% of that's $4,000, let's say. Well, I'm not gonna put $4,000 on one card because that's gonna throw me over on that one card, which guaranteed very next month, my credit scores will all drop because I went over 10%. Like, and it'll drop like a point, which again, in the grand scheme of things, nobody cares about 1 point. So debt to income, debt to credit ratio is huge, and then payments. So some people will tell young people, well, worst thing you can do is get a credit card. I'm gonna tell you that, in my opinion, the best thing that you can do is get a credit card. If you wanna build your credit, you get one credit card, you literally pay it off every single month. I mean, I probably have like 6 different credit cards now. That's the other thing. So one of the bigger things that affects your credit is length of time that the account's been open. So your average age of your credit account is a huge factor on your credit score. So I mean, like I literally have a credit card that I opened when I was a college freshman. I still have it, and it has a $35 annual fee, and it drives me insane. I've asked them numerous times. I'm like, come on, like, can we make this go away? Nope, sorry, it still terms the card, but I'm not going to close it because I've literally that's literally. Okay, so it's literally 30 years of credit history. So if I close it, that would dramatically affect my average age of my credit accounts.
yes.
Yeah, cause I was gonna ask, what's the benefit of having so many open credit card accounts?
So that's the other thing. So literally, for example, like I think my credit score right now is 768. If you don't have it, I would tell you, get Credit Karma, it's free. You can look at your credit score every single day. You'll see there's 3 companies out there, there's TransUnion, Experian, and Equifax. And Credit Karma will always show you at least 2 of those, 3. And it's free. The other thing is, the great thing about Credit Karma I like is because it coaches you on those things that I talked about. But Credit Karma is always telling me like, hey, increase your credit score by opening a new account. Because again, if I open another account, it demonstrates that number one, for 2 reasons. One is it demonstrates that I have the ability to access additional credit, but it then also increases the amount of credit that I have available to me. Which then, of course, looks good to banks because they're just like, well, someone else is willing to loan Vernon, another $10,000, $20,000 if he wanted it. I know, but so. But the biggest reason I keep those accounts open is just because, again, if I close one, it's going to dig my score. So now I literally only have that one that has a fee. If somebody came, people are just like, well, hey, why don't you get the Southwest, because I fly Southwest all the time. Just get the Southwest card. No, the Southwest card has like a $70 annual fee.
Oh,
I'm not paying an annual fee, just to get Southwest points. So, but credit, if there was one thing I would tell you, Credit Karma, it's free.
and I've got an experience with my daughter that I wasn't a very good parent for her because I was like, oh, hold off on getting a credit card, and that. So then when she went to Kansas City, here in Colby, Hayes, they don't look at your credit score as much for renting an apartment, but in Kansas City, they sure do. So
Absolutely.
when she went up there, she didn't really have a credit score, and that hurt. That was hard. Yeah.
And I mean, back in the day, every company that you would have a bill from used to report to credit agencies. They don't anymore. They don't, like, companies like Verizon, like your cell phone companies, they used to report every month payment histories, and they don't.
Oh, I didn't know that.
And so that's one of the things I always tell people, like, and here's the reason why you'll hear a lot of people tell young people not to get a credit card. Because what do you do when you get a credit card?
You spent.
You use it, you spend it, you buy stuff that you probably really don't need. But, you have that ability to do it, and so then you run up a bill, and then you don't pay the bill on time, or you're constantly paying high interest rates, because what do you think the average interest rate on a credit card is today?
12.
What?
12? What's it?
If only.
28?
What'd you say?
21.
I said 28.
28 is right.
Yeah, good job.
The average interest rate on a credit card today is 28%.
That's a lot.
Every year, so 28% a year.
So if you had $1,000 balance and you didn't pay that balance down in a year, you would pay $280 in interest. Isn't that
At
amazing?
least,
Over a quarter. Yeah,
at least.
that's the average. Yeah, isn't that crazy? Bless you.
So, that's the one reason, that's the number one reason why you get parents tell their kids, no, don't get a credit card. I tell everybody that they're wrong. The best thing that you can do for your kid is get them a credit card. Now,
Teach
if
them.
you're the person that if you don't think that you have the willpower to be able to not use your credit card, then you get your credit card and you freeze it in a block of ice. And you throw it in the freezer. So that way if you ever do think, oh my God, I really need to do it, well, you're either gonna wait for it to defrost or you're gonna start banging it with a hammer to get to it faster.
That prevents impulse buying.
It helps.
Yeah.
It helps. Any other questions?
That was a good question.
How many of you guys in here have a credit card? That's good.
Yeah.
See, I think that's, like, I was at K-State just a few weeks ago, and I was kind of surprised, like, when I was in school, you couldn't go to the student union without there being at least 4 or 5 different
Yes.
tables set up, people trying to sign you up for credit cards. And, this is how they got you. Well, you sign up for this credit card, we'll give you this free t-shirt.
Yeah.
Or sign up for this credit card and you get a king-size Hershey bar. Why in the world we thought that signing up for a credit card was worth a king-size Hershey bar, but guaranteed at the end of the day, they didn't have a single Hershey bar left. They always did have the coolest t-shirts though. They were always so much better than the bookstore.
Okay, anybody else? Any other questions?
What's the best thing right now to invest in?
The best thing?
Or like the smartest investments, I guess.
The smartest, so, and even my friends that are investors will tell you the same thing. If there's one thing you pay attention to, it's the S&P 500. I don't give a crap about the Dow. I always look at the S&P 500. And so if there was one thing I would invest in, if you get like, and again, I'm not advocating for acorns, I just heard good things about it, but take your pick, you can use anything. Find an ETF, like state exchange traded fund, or an index fund, basically for the S&P 500, put your money in that. I'm a huge fan of index funds just because they follow, so they'll pick an index and they follow it.
Yeah.
So, nice thing is, low expense rates, cause you don't have a person trying to pick winners and losers. They just try to match, they're just matching that index. S&P 500 historically always is the best. I don't remember what the average is now, but, like say for, like ballpark, you put money in the S&P 500 today, 20 years, you should see on average at least 8 to 10% growth on that investment. Maybe even 12, if you hit a really good cycle. Now, here's the other thing I'm gonna tell you about investing. You put it in there and you never look at it again. Especially if you're using an index fund. I always tell people, like, right now, like, I really wanna look at my Fidelity app and look at my retirement account. But if you've been paying attention to the markets at all, like, if I look, I'm just gonna be angry and mad. Because it's going down right
Yeah,
now.
it is now.
We are, and of course, I'm not an investment banker, but this is the one big thing I work with on the foundation side here at the college is in our investments. And I would tell you that we are ripe for a major correction in the markets. The markets have gone up, have performed amazing for the last 10 to 15 years. And it's time for a correction. So,
Do you see that picture on the board on the very right-hand side? You see a little stick figure standing on the edge of a cliff? It's kind of right below the paper.
oh, okay,
Yeah.
yeah.
So different economists have different ideas of where we're headed.
If I had to guess, I'm guessing the bottom.
Oh, depression? Woo.
There's too many things. Inflation's too high. Look, case in point, read an article this morning. That's talking about investing is number two. Number one thing I would tell people, especially young people, read. Just read anything. So I literally spend the first 2 hours every day reading. Some of it's for fun, some of it's for work. One of the articles I read before I came over here though was talking, so right now we're in a big, April's a big month for people to start reporting financial results. In their call this week, the McDonald's CEO talked about how low-income individuals are being especially conscious now of where they spend their dollars. Which is, if you read between the lines, what he's telling us is low-income earners aren't even going to McDonald's for a burger. Because the cost of a burger at McDonald's now is so high. So that tells me that if the folks that typically are the number one consumers of McDonald's are no longer choosing to go to McDonald's to get a meal, it's bad.
We're in a tough situation.
We're in a tough situation, yeah. So the fact that it's, what'd you say, $6 for ramen noodles?
It's actually $3.68 for a 12-pack.
What?
It's actually $3.68 for a 12-pack.
$3.68 for a 12-pack.
Yeah.
How do you
Depends where
think
you
the
go.
rest of the market will like respond if we do go into a depression? Cause like I'm studying grain merchandising, so on the grain side, we're going down a little bit too.
Yep.
So do
So-
you think that will continue?
So that's the interesting thing. So I don't remember which one it is, but commodities and the market usually are inverse. So if the market crashes, commodities usually go the other way. But that's the one thing I would say right now, and especially with all my friends that are in the investment side. We just don't know. I mean, the market's been so good for the market's been so good for so long, it is, like, right now, the market is defying all history.
Right.
Everything we know about the market, like, we should have already had a correction, and we haven't. There's just so much, so you've got, I mean, politics, oh my God, we're in an election year, Lord only knows what that'll do,
Yeah.
depending on who wins and loses. What's going on in the Middle East? If there's, like, what's the number one thing that solves depression? War.
Mm-hmm.
Cause what happens when there's a war?
Money.
Expenses.
Yeah, especially for the United States, cause we're the number one arms producer. So if there's a war out around the rest of the world, it's usually pretty good for us. Which is a really sad statement.
Yeah.
But, yeah, if I had, I mean, I hope I'm wrong, but there are too many, you look at the housing prices,
Mm-hmm.
especially, and then you look at like what's happening in bigger markets, like in Austin, house prices are plummeting. If you're a person that had a house in Texas, like, there are people in Colby that moved here from Texas that have a house in Texas they still can't sell.
Right.
So I think, cause I have a friend of mine who has a house in Austin, he moved to Alabama. It's been on the market now for 12 months, he's been on the market for a year. And in his community, there are 187 houses in his price range right now that he's competing against trying to sell his out,
Oh, my goodness.
so.
Wow.
There's like a new cycle of people coming in, like as people are coming in, a lot of people are leaving. It's just kind of how Texas is right now. Austin especially, but
Yeah, Austin's getting heavy.
yeah. Keep Austin weird, that's been their thing.
Yeah. Yeah, politics is a big problem for Austin too.
Homeless population too, which they're almost worse than Houston, and Houston is like almost twice as big.
Yeah, of all the places to be when you're homeless, Houston would not be my pick. Jesus. Alright, well, thank you.
Yeah, thank you very much.
How many of you guys are in macro? I guess I'll see you tomorrow.
Some of them had macro last semester.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. But yeah, so, yeah, I appreciate you coming very much. Thank you
Welcome.
very much.
Thanks, everybody.
And I'm glad for the questions like this. It makes it more interesting as a speaker, doesn't it?
Do what?
It makes it more interesting when they're interactive with
Oh, yeah,
questions and
so
stuff.
I do some, I don't call it teaching, I facilitate some classes. And I'm a big fan of silence. It's like when I ask for questions and nobody talks, I've literally stood in front of a room for 25 minutes. Just before somebody finally spoke, and just like, and then what that was, they didn't ask a question. Well, actually, I take that back, they did ask a question. They said, "Are you okay?" And I said, "Yeah, I'm just waiting for another question."
Before you leave, can I get a picture with you? You want?
Yeah.
Or with the class or whatever?
Where do you want me?
Just anywhere, that's fine. Can you reach my phone, Lisa? Okay.
Right here, I'll stand in the back so that you can actually see all your faces.
Okay. Okay, do you guys mind being in the picture?
I guess.
If you don't want to be, you can move, but. There we go. Now, could somebody take my picture? No. You want to come back here? I can come back here. Thanks, Nick. And then, I gotta see that. You got it, okay. Back, you got it, okay.
I say if a 20-year-old can't use a phone, we're in trouble.
I know, but my phone is so full. I have to go the roundabout way.
I thought you were gonna say it was because your phone was so old.
Well, no, it's so full. Do you care if I put it on our business Facebook? Okay.
Please.
All right, thank you. What's that? Say
You wanna
it.
like flip it?
Flip it? What do you mean? Okay, thank you. Appreciate it. Okay, well, appreciate it very much. I'll see you tomorrow for that.
See you in the morning.
Thank you. So if anybody wants to come back tomorrow at 8 o'clock, you're welcome to go. He's gonna have a quick bed.
I gotta
Maybe
sleep.
some of the same. Okay. Oh, and by the way, I've got an assignment ready. I'll just publish it for you guys to do a reaction to his talk. What stood out to you? What was important? Whatever, okay? Okay, see you guys.
So I tried to do that,
I know, I thought I had it set for you.
and
Just
it said unanswered. So I don't know if I accidentally started an